Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Rent Prep for Landlords. Steve and I are excited because we actually have a couple guests back on the podcast. If you guys recall, we had Scott and Kim Hampton of Hampton and Hampton on for podcast episode 148, and we'd like to welcome you back to the podcast, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and if you have listened to that episode before, it was really interesting. Scott and Kim, you guys, forgive me if I can't remember, how many rentals do you guys manage in the, Central Florida area?
Yeah, we have just under 1,000 homes, and we're across the whole central area from east to west coast.
Okay. And the reason that we reached out to Scott and Kim again to be on the podcast is being in Central Florida and some of the disasters that just hit there in the form of hurricanes. We were talking about how if there was somebody who knew how to handle insurance claims, it would be these two, because they've got just under 1,000 rentals. And, you know, unfortunately, you've been dealing with this, and that's why we wanted to have you back on the podcast and pick your brain here for a minute.
Thank you. We look forward to hopefully providing everybody some information, and I know we provide some bullet points and even a website that relates to Florida, but it relates to everybody in reference to the assignment of benefits. So we look forward to getting going.
So the first step. So, well, let me ask you this: how many claims do you think you guys had to actually submit just in the past, just from these the hurricanes that ripped through?
Oh, wow. I'm going to say between our three offices, maybe about 60.
60.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I want you to know too, Eric and Steve, we went ahead and had every one of our houses inspected by a third-party inspector after the hurricane in all our markets, and the company paid for that. And I want you to know, we found what we ended up finding too. Were interesting is trees fell in backyards, fences fell down. Obviously, backs of the roof, maybe the shingles were off. When you drove up to the front, it kind of looked okay.
Right.
But when you actually went around the backyard, and then what we ended up looking at is, did the tenant even call anything in on this one? And you'll find the tenants never even reported any damage.
Right. And, you know, you make a good point about being timely and the importance of being timely with these things. And I think that's a great point to make. You know, don't just assume that's probably all right. It's a really good idea to do a visual inspection. And if you can have the third party come out there, I mean, that's always a huge benefit.
It helped a lot. I mean, we broke up. We didn't even have electric or internet or anything at our office. We met at like McDonald's. You go, okay, Sally, you go do these 5. I'll do these 5. And it got to be, we're like, okay, we have 1,000 homes. It's like, we are never going to be able to fully get this done. So
right.
I decided as a company, we'll pay for the inspections, have them done professionally, and make sure that all of them get done. When you know that the tenants, some of them aren't going to report anything.
Super smart. Love it.
So looking at your bullet points here, a little cheat sheet that I'm looking at, what's the first step that you'd recommend to somebody who's looking to submit an insurance claim? What's the first thing that they should do?
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, we've got down there the taking photos, and I think nowadays another great tool you have is in most everybody's hand, an iPhone, and that's called Do a Video. And if you can do that video even beforehand of walking the outside of the house or through the inside of the house, and have that video and upload it to your either iCloud or Dropbox or Google Drive, then you can go ahead and do photos and do that video, because the adjuster, when they come out, that's what they want to see. The first thing they'll say is, do you have any photos of the damage?
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense. And then obviously, you know, taking any necessary steps to prevent any further damage, anything that could be damaged more or get worse in the time that it takes to get somebody out there professionally to fix it up, right? I'm sure in a hurricane situation, you know, that could be a busted out window that might need to be covered, or maybe some shingles that got ripped off and just cover the exterior, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want the water getting back in. And of course, here in Florida during this time, it rains a lot. And if you don't get some visqueen or whatever, tarp up on the roof, or you haven't moved some things, you're going to constantly get that. And then we're going to get mold, and you know, it's just a vicious circle that happens. So we try to get to these things as quick as possible. And our big thing that we did prior to is we called a couple of our tree guys, we called 3 or 4 handymen, a couple of our GCs. We had them all on call for us. So we were able to immediately get them going. and we triage them, whatever was most important and needed to be handled first.
Right. Yeah, I'm dealing with trees on my property right now, and it's a nightmare.
You've been dealing with trees for like 6 months
God.
at your property.
And Steve will tell you, tree work is not cheap.
It is not cheap. We had the emerald ash borer. Did that affect you guys down in Florida? Are you familiar with that?
Didn't get that.
So it's an invasive species. I think it's a northeastern thing. I know it stretches down to at least North Carolina, where this Asian beetle basically is destroying ash trees. And just so happens I've got 28 ash trees on my property.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, and I've had all kinds of ridiculous quotes. Like you said, it is not cheap. There's no cheap way to remove trees, especially when you got houses around or obstacles or wires. One kind of pretty good piece of advice, Eric, I'm not even sure if I told you this. I reached out to my town and said, hey, can I just get somebody out here to take a look and see maybe you guys would take some responsibility for some stuff close to the road and take it down. And they took down about 10 trees.
So you just put it on other people's tax dollars, huh,
Yes,
Steve?
100%. Yes. No, yes.
Spread the burden.
Yes. Yeah, that was my first option. Go to them. Well, actually, my first option was the cable company, because I've heard sometimes they'll trim stuff around wires and stuff like that, and the electric company. Neither of them wanted to take any responsibility for anything. I wasn't getting anywhere, but the town actually did some work for free, so that took a little bit of load off me, and it was nice.
Oh, that helped. Yeah, I think we spent over $2,000 at our house alone.
Yeah, it is not cheap. I couldn't believe it. These, the tree removal service, and every little thing counts. The buzzing it up, chopping the stump off. I mean, everything that you just don't think of to get rid of a tree. It's really not easy.
It isn't.
People don't think about that. Okay, keeping those trees trimmed, it's cheaper to trim them away from the house and off the line prior to the storm. It will save you thousands later.
That is a great point. Great point. And your next bullet point on here is something that I think just every landlord should get into a very good habit of doing for everything across the board, which is keeping receipts and invoices, right?
So true. So true. We have an online portal for all of our owners, so we keep everything there. And of course, we're in the cloud. So if our office was destroyed, we could be up and running, the next day. And it's good to do that because they will come and look at those things. So you want to make sure on the flip side that you've got all those in order.
That's a great point.
So, Scott, as far as the next bullet point here, it says that you want to contact the insurance carrier directly to report the claim. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, what I mean, and we as property managers, and there's a lot of you maybe that are using property managers, we aren't actually have the contract with the insurance company. You, the owner, has the contract. So I can't call and make a claim on your behalf, and they won't give me any information on your behalf. So you're going to have to get on the phone with your carrier. We recommend normally, you call the carrier. Don't call your insurance agent because he'll say call the 800 number. And you want to have that declaration page. We call them deck pages. It's that first page, about the second page in usually, and you'll see at the top, it'll say declaration page. That deck page really is kind of a quick synopsis of your policy, meaning liability coverage, deductible, the perils that it's going to cover, and then right on there will be an 800 number and the account number. Those are the things you're going to need to have right in your hand when you call the 800 number. They're going to ask you. So have that all ready to go when you get the 800 number. What's the account number? Here it is. And then you can start that process. But having that deck page, though, is we ask all clients for it when they sign on with us. And we periodically ask for an updated deck page because periodically once a year, and we recommend at least once a year, shop your insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and reshop it. And you will be surprised. Then it may go a year or so and you'll have a little increase. Then you'll get kind of comfortable. And we all need to know that after every year or two, you need to reshop your insurance.
Yeah. Here's a good piece of advice. Don't make really good friends with your insurance guy, because then it's uncomfortable to shop the insurance. That's sort of the position that I'm in.
Is that personal
right now.
advice? Yeah.
Yeah. Now I feel like I'm a jerk if I leave this guy, but then on the other hand, I'm like, man, I've been seeing a lot of Geico commercials. I feel like you could do better for me. So that's
exactly what happens. That's how they keep you.
That is how they keep
Hey,
you.
I'll share a story of how I'm a monster. I switched from my insurance company to Geico for my car insurance, which broke my mother's heart. because my mother was my insurance agent, and
Oh, wow.
my parents owned an insurance agency with Nationwide, but like they were like upset I was leaving, but they're like, we get it, like we cost $500 more a year, like we're not just gonna charge our son more money, you know. I did keep them for the home insurance while they still had the agency, so
That was nice of you.
You know what also is good too? We were talking about the receipts. We require all of our tenants to have renters policies, and
Smart.
we are actually additional interest on there, or additionally insured, so we know if anything happens, gets canceled, etc. But during the storms, what happened? A lot of people lost electric, they lost food, they lost work, all those things. And FEMA has been here, and some people are getting $1,000, $2,000 because they have all that and they were able to go to them. So all of that's really important as well.
Yeah, I think
the homeowner's policy does not cover that, the landlord policy.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out we get a lot of visits to the site and a lot of tenants that call us and inquire and want to know if it's legal for the landlord to require renters insurance. Yes. And yes, the answer is yes, it is, regardless of your state. And it's a very good idea to do so. A very good idea. Yeah.
We did have one tenant vacate early because of the house which was damaged. Again, the owner was able to turn the lease in, and the insurance company paid on the lease too. They paid on the rent.
Wow, that's
awesome. Loss of rental income.
Loss of rental income because you can't live there, and so they started paying the rent.
Beautiful.
Now, did you guys have any issues with like tenants being displaced and then them having to be in a hotel, or was the hurricane not bad enough by the time it hit your part of Florida?
Well, some of them did. I mean, I think they chose to, but I mean, of course, they have no power. They had no water. No, most of them had water, just mostly power, but most of them don't have generators. So a lot of them did have to go elsewhere, or, they were warning you, leave. And so many people did. And I don't know if that you would call that displaced. I mean, other than if the house was damaged itself.
Sure. Did you get any requests from any tenants though for like a reduced rent because they weren't in the place? And what'd you do? What'd you do with those requests?
No. No, well, you have to be kind of nice about it, but you have to explain to them, that's what your renter's policy is for. And also this is an act of God. This isn't something that anyone knew was going to happen, and they have to take care of themselves and their families and do what they see fit. But no, we did not reimburse anybody.
Now, Eric, we had some of that displacement, and we've been doing this too long. In 2004, during Hurricane Charlie, we did have tenants that the houses were damaged so badly that we had to move them out. So we were able to move them around to other houses.
Okay.
So we did do that in 2004 when Hurricane Charlie came through, and actually the next 2 weeks later was Jean, and then 2 weeks later was Francis.
Yeah.
So we
did. We had, I think it was 11 condemned houses at that time.
Wow.
Yeah. That was a lot worse than this one. This one was just widespread.
Okay.
I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Right. So as far as the process, one of the bullet points you have here for us is keeping good records of all contact information, claims info, etc. Just tell us a little bit about that. Do you guys have any kind of system that you use? Kim, if you want to answer this one.
Well, we have a portal for all of our clients. And like Scott said, we keep all the receipts in there, but it's good for people to videotape before and after. But what's really nice is on all of our homes, and I think we talked about that on the last podcast, we have a whole professional inspection done on all of our houses prior to the tenant moving in, during the course of renewal, and again at move out. So we have 3 different kinds. So we do have photos of the property, which I think would be extremely helpful to anybody if they had to go for a claim.
And back to that, in 2004, the adjusters were asking us for the pictures of the move-ins because the house had gotten damaged so badly. They wanted to see what it looked like before.
That's really interesting, because I think a lot of times when we're talking about move-in photos, we're thinking about tenant damage, but you're not thinking about a hurricane or something coming through and an insurance adjuster asking for it.
Sure.
Yeah, they do. They will ask you for that to prove what was there and what was was it granite? What? And you're telling, oh yeah, I had granite and stainless steel, and you know what I mean? And they're like, Well, so, but mainly they wanted to know what was there before, so they asked us for those pictures and videos to be able to substantiate the claim.
Yeah, we just talked about this on an episode of one of the podcasts recently, where a lot of landlords get denied in court seeking damages beyond the security deposit because they don't have that before picture.
That's correct.
So super important. So that's a great point.
Builds a great trail for you after you own the property for years. You have multiple years now of it.
Right. That's a great point.
So, Scott, one of the another bullet point here. I was so thankful you put these together for us. But you talked about not signing any kind of assignment of benefits or an AOB contract. Can you explain that a little bit more for our listeners?
Yeah, we went ahead and put that in there, and we also put a link as to when you hear Citizens. That is a state-run insurance pool here in Florida, because a lot of insurance companies here in Florida left because they feel it was kind of high risk. So the state runs one called Citizens. Wow. And we put the website in there and the link to the AOB. And AOB is an assignment of benefits. And what happens is you'll have contractors come into the areas where there may be, and again, you had this in California, fires. In Houston, you had floods. Yeah. And here we had a hurricane. And I hate to say that, but this year was a tough year for everybody.
Yeah.
And they will come into an area and they'll have you thing called an assignment of benefit. And what that does is basically they'll say, hey, I can get your house fixed for the deductible, $1,000 or something, and you won't cost you anything else. Sign this. That allows them now to basically act as you, go to your insurance company and file a claim, and they, as the roofing contractor, will now say, I'm putting a roof on for X dollars. They get the money to put the roof on and basically become you, and it's not fraud, but it's right at
kind of.
Yeah. Well, reminds me of like car dealerships, kind of similar, right? I mean, you hear about a lot of car dealerships doing the same thing when they're trying to replace something, and they have full control to go back to the insurance company and say, oh yeah, and we're also going to need to replace the radiator or this and that.
Right.
So yeah, you're putting it in the hands of people whose income and livelihood depends on it as well. So
well, and going back, and you're going to put that website, I'm sure, on there too. That affects everyone's insurance rate. The insurance companies, and believe me, they're going to give them an inflated price on that roof. And it's not going to be competitive where we're getting 2 or 3 bids. And then basically that insurance company is going to pass those costs along to you. They're just going to get a higher rate.
Now, if somebody was listening and they already have signed an assignment of benefits, do you think it's kind of too late for them and they're kind of stuck with that contractor they're working with? Or?
Well, we just did one of these, actually. You can go back, and again, I don't know what each one said. The one that one of our clients signed, we were able to actually get to write a letter. We used our attorney, write a letter to them saying he wanted to cancel it. So what they did, though, they came back and said, look, we put a tarp up there. You need to pay us for the tarp.
Here's $30.
Yeah.
So other than that, he was able to cancel it. They usually, and again, depending on what each one says, and I'm not an attorney, but you need to get your attorney to look at it. Don't sign it first. And they'll tell you not to sign it. Your attorney will tell you not to sign it. Is that basically you are usually allowed to go back and cancel it. They'll fight you on it too, so be ready for a battle.
Now, one thing that you pointed out here in your bullet points that I found interesting, again, we're not in a hurricane area, just like you guys don't have to deal with blizzards and snow. That's something that's very much a part of.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, very much a part of where we are. But it's interesting. You just don't think of it. And I guess if you'd have asked me this as like a quiz question, I don't know if I would have been able to answer this right, that hurricane claims do not count against your record and don't impact your future rates, right?
That's correct.
That's true. And a lot of people would not have known that.
They were a lot of our owners were afraid.
Yeah, I would
understand.
be. Yeah, I can agree with that. I think it's actually great that that's one situation where you feel like there's some integrity there on the insurance and saying, it's out of your control. You shouldn't be penalized for it, right?
Well, another thing too on there, just so you know too, if your area is considered a state of emergency like we were here in Florida, and they were in, I know, California, by the federal government, that basically you can basically go to your mortgage company and basically they'll hold 3 months.
Oh wow!
To make the payment for 3 months if it's an owner-occupied property.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. That's why you see a lot of times in areas a big push, especially here in Western New York. We see this a lot of times where we'll get hit with a snowstorm and it's pretty bad and it might cause some roofs to cave in. And now you got people really reaching out to their politicians saying, hey, this needs to be a state of an emergency. So we really rely on our local politicians to be able to translate that information up to the governor and say, hey, yeah, they got hit pretty hard. And that makes sense. Once you get that designation, it gives you a little bit of extra protection and some rights in there too.
Yeah. Well,
That helps a lot.
Your house may have been destroyed, your livelihood, the business you worked in, all those things, you need a little breathing room instead of thinking I got a mortgage payment coming in 15 days,
Mm-hmm. Another point you got here, Scott, I'll go back to you on this one, is that you said hurricane claims are cumulative. Can you explain that a little bit and why people need to understand that if they're dealing with a disaster like this?
What happens is in the state of Florida, and again, I don't know across country, after Hurricane Andrew in 1992 went through, the insurance companies in all their infinite wisdom passed a law here in the state of Florida on the state level that said if your home is damaged by a hurricane or a wind event, that basically their deductible goes from normally your deductible maybe $500 or $1,000 goes to 2% of the value.
Okay.
So your house is $300,000. Your deductible now goes to $6,000.
Right.
So you now are looking at potentially putting a roof on say $10,000 to $15,000 roof on your property. The pool enclosure is gone. The fence is gone. You may have water intrusion. These kind of things. So, but what happens in these cases is, I wanted to explain that deductible is, let's just say we had a number of owners that had a $2,600. They had the insurance company go out. They said, no, it's about a $2,500 claim. Their deductible because of the hurricane is $6,000. It kind of just adds into that. So if they have an additional claim later, it kind of takes that $2,600 basically off of the $6,000. It makes it cumulative so that you've got it's not like you have to start all over again at $6,000. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you end up having to process another policy later in the year, you're saying that it doesn't start at $0. You're adding that in from earlier in the year.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there you go.
All right.
All right. So this one, I think is super important. Gets overlooked a lot. I know a lot of, I was in a service industry long ago where doing chimney cleaning and chimney repairs. And I always felt this uncomfortable interaction when homeowners were asking me, are you insured? And do you have, are you licensed? Let me see your credentials. There was this weird exchange. And of course I'd have no problem showing them. I was prepared. I had everything ready to be able to hand them. But I was pretty shocked how many people don't ask that, right? These are people who working on your house. And like you said, you got a $300,000 house. You want to make sure they're at least insured if something goes wrong, and things can definitely go wrong. So that was one of your bullet points here. Anything to sort of add to that? If you guys have any horror stories on working with a contractor that wasn't insured?
We have it happen all the time. People call us up and we'll go visit their house, do a presentation, walk around, and maybe it's $500,000 home. We say, okay, so we're going to include pool and lawn care. All right, who does your lawn care? Oh, it's John, and he does my neighbors. And I'm like, well, do you have his insurance and license? And oh, I don't even know. And you're like, oh my gosh, you have a $500,000 house. It's like you're saying, and they don't even know. Right. And we tell them we, of course, can't allow them as a company on the property to pay the bills or anything because if something were to happen, the liability is huge. You need to have somebody who's licensed and insured, and you need to check and verify that all the time, which we do. We can't even pay anybody if we don't have those items, and therefore then they can't work for us. So you constantly have to keep up on it, I don't remember what's a nightmare, honey, that we would have had with any of our vendors that weren't insured. I don't know if we have any because we don't do that. Yeah, we
just having that insurance and then also the workers' comp, or here it's workers' comp too, so their guys are insured. So we currently do have one that's going right now after the hurricane, where they said that the guy doing next door said one of the contractors was repairing the house next door, which was our side, and said that he damaged his truck. Well, they're filing on his insurance saying he damaged the truck, so they're filing on our vendor's insurance to correct what he said damaged his truck sitting in the driveway. And sometimes they build townhouses in long rows. So when you pull in, the guy next door is right next to you,
Right.
So it damages his truck. So, we're dealing with that. But that's common. Also, real common is with lawn vendors is the rock gets shot out of the mowing. It hits the car or the window.
Yeah.
And someone's got to pay for it. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. Let me give you one quick nightmare story from my chimney sweeping days. This was crazy. I put a ladder onto a chimney, and there's no way to inspect the chimney physically from the ground when you're trying to get up there. You have to get up there first. And I got up about 3/4 of the ladder, and the chimney started to lean over. Right, the mortar in between the bricks had just gotten so loose, and the chimney just sort of slanted and kind of leaned over. I was scared to death. I think I slid down the ladder like Clark Griswold on Christmas Vacation, just to get down as quick as I could. But that was something that I filed through my insurance, and that's a perfect reason why contractors need that insurance coverage, because if something like that happens that you don't mean, things can happen. Who knows? And you just don't want that stuff falling on you personally, coming from a business owner's point of view, as a chimney owner, sweep owner, or a lawn care or whatever. If you've got personal liability, you're treading some real dangerous territory. So
yeah, I just think sometimes people think they're going to get things done cheap, and they go on to Craigslist or whatever, and they find Joe Schmo, and he's going to do X for you, and you gave me this bid for $2,000, he's going to do it for $1,000. I'm like, wow, that's a huge difference. And I wonder why. And most of the time they either take your money and they're gone, or they do a shoddy job, and then you have no recourse behind the job.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, the last point I want to bring up here as far as insurance claims goes, Kim, maybe you can speak to this one, is the idea of providing partial payment up front with additional recoverable depreciation. Can you explain that?
Yeah, what happens when you make a claim, you've got to, again, keep all your receipts and make sure they're licensed and insured. They'll give you a portion of it, but when you go back and provide everything to them, they'll say, okay, your roof is 5 years old and the life of it really is 12. And so they'll do that much of it. They'll put the asset at that. So you got to, because some people go, oh, I'm just going to get a new roof. And I'm like,
sure,
no, it's been on there for 10 years. And they don't get that, and you're still going to meet that $6,000 deductible.
Yeah, I would think with like a car, if you're driving a 10-year-old car, you realize you're not going to get it at your purchase price value, and that makes sense. But we don't really think of that in terms of a home sometimes.
You're like, why not?
We have to explain that over and over, like you were talking about earlier, the depreciation, because you did use the roof. It's been on the house for 10 years, and you can't buy a car, drive for 10 years, and turn it in and say it's new. So and when they say recoverable too, they want to see if you go back to them and say, here's the paid receipt from the vendor, the permit. Sometimes they'll ask you also for waiver of liens. They want to make sure that the vendor signs off that they paid the supply house, that they paid the worker, so they don't ever have them come back later and say, hey, Joe ran off with the money and didn't pay me, I want to lien the house. So they may require waiver of liens too. And before you pay everybody, make sure that if you need that, to get the vendor to sign it prior to the check. So you hold the check in one hand and you have the waiver of lien in the other. They sign this before you get this.
Okay, that's a great tip.
That is a great tip. It really is.
Yeah.
You'd be shocked how many people don't realize that they have liens still on them, or think that they just disappear or go away, or I haven't thought about it in a year or two or whatever. We run into it all the time here because we report liens on our reports. It's shocking to me. So that's a great point.
We see it when investors purchase properties, and you have to get those cleared, of course, for title. And you'll see them on there, and you're like, oh my God, this is from like 10 years ago. And On the other hand, too, if people try to keep the money, I don't know, Scott, if you want to cover that for a minute, when they make a claim.
Well, just so that everybody understands, when they make the assessor, the adjuster comes out, he's going to give you a thing called the scope of work. And they're going to come back with a scope for you, meaning they will tell you, okay, the room is, 10 by 10. We pay $1 per foot for paint it. We pay so much for the carpet. You have a low, medium, or high level carpet. And, they have already they have numbers. They know exactly what they're going to pay so much. And so they'll have that scope. And with that scope, they'll then give you a check relating to the scope. So we then ask the client, okay, send me the scope, we'll bid it. And they'll say, no, make a bid. And we'll say, well, what's the scope? and they'll say, well, no, give me a bid. Well, no, I can't give you a bid. I don't even know what I'm bidding on.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so, you kind of get into a little cat and mouse game there where people, I think, are trying to keep a little extra. And
Sure.
So just so you understand, that's normally how it's done is you get a scope with your check here, and they'll downline it to the room sizes, the level of carpet, the paint. I mean, it'll be very detailed. Give that to your contractor. He can bid right off of that.
It's probably also pretty important to also point out, I don't know, again, we're not in a hurricane area, but I know that my dad, when he was like real young, right after high school, before college type of thing, he was a storm chaser where he would go around with his truck and a chainsaw and just do side work or extra jobs. So you got a lot of people coming into your area that are chasing these storms in the aftermath, trying to get work. So these aren't like your normal neighborhood guys you're dealing with all the time, right? You're your normal vendors sometimes.
Oh no, we see them all the time. And that's why we were talking about, you have to really be careful who you let onto your property and who they say they're going to do the work. And we have them knock on the tenants' doors. And they say, oh, I don't own this. They go, oh, well, we're going to cut that tree down. They go, no, you're not. Stay off of here. I mean, they will try to push their way in, and that is them. They go from place to place doing that.
Right. Crazy.
Well, I just want to wrap this up here, but thank you guys so much for your time here. Hopefully, if somebody is dealing with this issue in the future, hopefully they can come across this video or podcast, because I'm sure it'll kind of give them a little bit of solace just to pick up some of the tips that you're laying down here. And if somebody is listening from the Central Florida area too, and maybe you're thinking, I don't know if I have the right property manager, you might want to check out Hampton and Hampton. They do a great job. They're one of the few. Is it CRMC? Is that the acronym? Am I correct on that?
CRMC. Mm-hmm.
Yep. You're one of the few in the country. Less than 100, right?
Yeah, less than 50.
Oh, that's about 50. Yeah.
Yeah, there's only about 50 of these certified residential management company designations handed out. And, you guys, your stuff. You're doing everything by the books. You're doing it the right way. And can't thank you enough for your time today and helping us out and helping people out that are in need listening to this.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.